All right, so let's talk about it. Wonder Woman 84. Initial thoughts, initial impressions. What was your reaction?
To me, the writing of the movie was really bad, and I thought that um, Gal Gadot was not as good in this as she was in the first one, which is also a little bit worrying because she was really kind of. I think in this one she was called to carry it more from an acting side than in the first one, and I don't think she did very well. From what I saw, I feel like this is going to turn a decent amount of people off from wanting to see a third one.
Yeah, if I were to describe it in a word, I would say it's a mess. It's a bit of a mess. Um, there was a lot left to be desired in this movie. There was a lot of questions that they created that they didn't answer. There's there was not there it's pretty clear that they did not have a good plan as to what they were doing and where they were going with it. Nothing about this was anywhere close to the level of the first one.
It's funny because like after I was done watching the movie, I was like, I don't feel like this is as good as the first one. And then in the back of my mind, I started wondering, like, was the first one as good as I thought? Like, do I misremember this? Like, was it really not that good? So I went back and watched the first one like the next day, and I was like, this is so much better than what I just saw. Why didn't they make another movie like this?
This is one of those situations where afterwards I was like, that was okay. And then the more I thought about it, the worse the film kept becoming in my mind. The more I broke it down, the more I thought about it, the worse it got. Like it's like the reverse Tenet. Like the more I think about it, the more I watch it, the better it gets. This is like the more I think about it, the worse the movie gets. Because I just keep finding more and more stuff that I'm like, what? Why? How? So let's get down to the dislikes and the problems. All right, so give me one problem. We'll go back and forth on this one. Give me one of your problems with the movie.
I've got a lot of problems with you people.
We're not that far removed from Festivus, so the area of grievances can occur.
Well, it seems like a minor thing, but I think it really points out just to me how poorly this movie was written. The moment I think in the movie that made me go, what? Like the loudest in my head was when when he was able to get into a fighter jet from the 1980s and fly it like with no instruction whatsoever, just because he was a pilot in the 1920s. So, like that's not how technology works.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't be able to just automatically know how to fly a 1980s fighter jet. And they like the fact that they completely just glossed over that and like they didn't even acknowledge that this is a problem. They're just like, yeah, he's doing it.
Yeah, he
and
like
also the fact
that
that
seconds.
Yeah, also the fact that that plane like would have fuel in it when it's a display aircraft. Like the whole sequence is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then turning it invisible when the only thing she had previously turned invisible, according to her, was a coffee cup.
Yeah.
Again, no.
The whole time, the whole way to Egypt.
Yeah, so that sequence just by itself, that's my first problem, and I think indicative of how I felt the writing for this movie went.
So one of the first ones for me was one of the questions I wanted answered was, why is this movie set in 1984? There is no explanation as to why this movie is set in 1984. And this, along with so much else in the movie, leads me to believe that they're just like, hey, we went in on the 80s nostalgia. And so they just created a bad caricature of the 1980s.
I felt like this is more of a broader thing, that I felt like the main conflict in the movie around this concept of wishing for something and then having something taken away from you is just so easily broken down and picked apart, because like just for a couple instances, like what if 30 people from the same country all wish they could be the king of their country?
Yeah.
Like what happens then? Who wins?
Yeah.
Because according to the like story behind the action, you get whatever you ask for. Like, secondly, would no one ask for this like megalomaniac to be stopped, or for like would no one ask for the world to end? Like, would the world not just explode? Like someone who was really sad and depressed, and to think that like this is unclear. Like if and they did a really bad job of explaining it because they didn't explain it. If he's the one who renounces his wish, does that renounce everyone's wish, or does every single person have to do it?
Yeah.
Because if every single person has to do it, it's never going to happen, because the person who asked for their mom's cancer to be taken away is not going to take their wish back. The problem I have with the opening sequence is that it completely goes against what happened in the first movie.
Yeah.
Because in the first movie, they tell her she's not allowed to train. And when she's found training as a teenager, her mom yells at her aunt.
Yeah.
So did her mom just ignore that for this? Like, is she allowed to just participate in this just for fun, just for once, you know?
Yeah.
Because to me, having the movie start out that way seems like the person who wrote it didn't even like watch the first movie.
Yeah.
Because it completely takes away what was a huge part of the story of the first movie.
Not to mention, can we talk about the scale? Like in the first movie, you get a few dozen Amazon warriors. In the opening sequence of this one, you've got an entire stadium full. Like, what are we talking about here? How is there now like an entire stadium full of these Amazon warriors? Like,
they must be visiting from the hidden island next door.
Yeah, I mean, my goodness. So my next complaint about this is the character of Diana really just spending 70 years pining for Chris Pine.
Chris Pining.
Yes. I mean, really, like 70 years. I mean, that seems outlandish. Like,
yeah,
like I understand.
Did this person just sit around this whole time and not experience a single ounce of joy in the rest of their life?
Yeah, I mean, are we really? I mean, that's half of her plot line for this movie is the fact that she missed Steve so badly and wanted him back and then has to give him up. But we're talking about a 70-year time gap. I mean, that's just not realistic. It's not realistic. I mean, sure, he will always be a part of her life and a part of her story. But that is really, I mean, that's really selling her short.
That kind of falls into maybe my biggest problem with the movie, which is just that I think that Gal Gadot just wasn't very good. And that was probably the most disappointing thing to me, because I thought she was quite good in the first one. And it seems like being asked to carry more of an emotional and leading load in this movie was too much for her to do well. And I'm kind of surprised by that. So that's probably why it's the most disappointing thing to me about the movie.
So for me, the next one is we have to talk about the fact that they gave absolutely zero explanation for why Steve comes back in some random dude's body.
Yeah.
Like, no explanation. Why is that a more plausible thing than just the normal Steve coming back? I mean, if he gets his wish granted, if she gets her wish granted, why is he in someone else's body? And they spend literally zero time even asking the question of why am I in some other dude's body? Like, they have him look at it and they tell you that he's in some other dude's body, but they just all accept it and move on like that's perfectly normal thing to happen. Well, and why this guy? Like, it's just a random dude who shows up. Like, he doesn't appear anywhere else in the movie. Just a guy walks in, and it's now Steve. And there's no reason as to why this particular guy. And then on top of that, at the end of the movie, the actual guy, freed of Steve's consciousness, shows up and talks to her. And you're like, well, what is that? Like he doesn't remember clearly. Why is he here? Like, I don't understand. This makes no sense.
So, like I said earlier, I'm just not sure where they go
Yeah.
from here because I just don't know what you do now.